Hey everyone, how's everything? My name is Ray Bonilla, and welcome back to Studio Bridge Artist Spotlight podcast. Today, I am super excited to for my guest Claudia Rilling. Claudia and I have been friends for a long time. I think we met in grad school and just been a fan ever since. And I'm so happy to have her on the podcast and can't wait to talk about it. If you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe the podcast, and or you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe, and consider subscribing on any of our podcasting platforms of choice. All right, Claudia, welcome. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Oh, you're welcome. It's so good to see you, Ray. I realized when you were doing the intro that it's probably been about 15 or 16 years since we met. So it doesn't seem like it's that long ago, but the time has passed so quickly.
Yeah, yeah. It's so funny because I remember our conversations that we would have. So for those of you who don't know, Claudia and I both went to grad school together at the Academy of Art University, and we had studios in the same, but the way it's set up, everyone had studios around each other. And so we had studios next to each other. And um, I guess we'd pass each other's studios as, on our way to cleaning our brushes or getting a cup of coffee or something like that. But like, it was like, that's when I had the best conversations with people. And um, I always remember our conversations. Like I to this day, just like kind of the things that we would talk about and like all the self discoveries that we were, it's like really formative.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I know. And that was such an awesome building, like right in North Beach in San Francisco.
yeah.
Yeah, that was really fun. It was small too, just that one little floor. Yeah.
Yeah, to think that it was I mean, there were so many great painters around uh that area. I mean, it was like yourself and then Jeremy Mann and Jacobson and Greg Gandy and Dan Ochoa. I mean, like,
Yeah,
list goes on, Heather
I know.
Burton. Just so many of us have just kind of gone off. Like we all had the same training, but like so it's amazing to see how unique everyone
Yep.
kind of became, we were kind of using the same palette in many cases or in the same classes and stuff. So, but before we met up in San Francisco, you're originally from like the East Coast, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yep.
Okay.
I'm from outside of Philadelphia. That's where I was born and raised. And then I went to Boston University for undergrad and I studied painting there. And then took like this, there was like, 8 years or 7 years in between. And I was like, I need grad school. I need this focused time. Cause like, when you're ages like 18 to 21 or 18 to 22, you're super young, and I think it's a very rare case that someone can develop their voice at such a young age. So you're just kind of learning some skills. Um, so yeah, so
Yeah,
I
I think
with Pennsylvania, I grew up and then ended up going to school in different places and then ended up
wow.
back in the Philadelphia area. Yeah.
So coming into to grad school, because what were your did you have the same influences coming in, um, or did they kind of evolve, or like who were you looking at that time in between that 8 span? Because that's quite a bit. I mean,
Yeah.
I was those young guy, I was one of those young people that went from undergrad to grad school, and if I do it over again, I'd have a break just because of like it's just so
Interesting.
underdeveloped, like
Yeah.
mentally,
Yeah.
that it takes you so many years afterwards to kind of sort out what it is that you were learning. Um,
And it continues, right?
right.
It's like, yeah, we're always trying to figure out who you are. At least I am. Ray, where did you go for undergrad?
I went to a place called SUNY Fredonia,
SUNY
and it was
Fredonia.
like a small like state college in New York.
Okay.
Just actually just north of Erie, Pennsylvania,
Yeah, yeah.
almost right on that border. And so yeah, so like I studied um equivalent. It was called media arts, but it was like web design and video, and then I ended up minoring in illustration because I really wanted to draw and become an animator, and that's what I wanted to do. I want to work for Pixar. So like I came to San Francisco with that in mind. Was I was a character animation program, 3D, and after a semester, it was like I think I took Mark Tennett's figure drawing
Wow.
class, and
Yeah.
I walked one step into that building. I smelled the linseed oil, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh no, I got to be here."
It seduced you. Yep.
Yeah,
And yeah, that's so interesting because illustrators get those amazing draftsmanship skills, and so you knew how to draw. You know, it's so important. It's so crucial, especially if you're working figuratively. I mean, I don't think it's as important if you're working very abstract, but
yeah, and I think our situation, our program is really unique in the sense that like they were both the same program outside of a couple of classes, right?
mhm.
Bill Mon was the head of both the fine art and illustration departments. So like
Oh, that's right.
I
Yeah.
love the fact that we all the illustrators got to hang out with the painters and vice versa, and that's really where I fell in love with just the idea of becoming a painter. I never
Mhm.
thought that was like a career path for myself.
Yeah. I know it is amazing. Gosh, and things have changed so much now. Like when we were in school, we didn't have like Instagram. We couldn't market ourselves. And now painters are like, we can be our own, just by posting our work regularly, we can build a whole entire, um, like I want to say career, not in a commercial sense, but just we can connect with all of these like-minded painters. But to your earlier question, Ray, like who my influences were at that time, I would say that I had a very classical drawing background. And the teacher that I studied with, it was a private art school outside of Philadelphia in Allentown. And the teacher at that time who I studied with he was great because he would always emphasize the fact that all painting is abstract at its core. And he had a back screen projector. So it was like this huge piece of glass. And through the back, he would project images, whether it was like a Chagall or a Morandi or a Ewan Uglo or a Raphael, and he would draw over it. And then he would let the actual image drop away to reveal the abstract movement. So that was
Wow.
so amazing to be taught that at a young age. Because in high school, I mean, the high school classes had to accommodate like, everyone. So they weren't teaching like anything academic in those classes. So that from that point, I became really, really fascinated with, yeah, I mean, Morandi's always been one of my favorites. He's amongst so many people's favorites, but like Anne Gale, I learned about at that age. So I was really into Anne Gale, like because she combined that amazing draftsmanship with that painterly ability, that
Yeah.
fracturing of edge, and like also I think in my 20s I was really into conveying emotion, and so those figurative works were so emotive, and I was so obsessed with like Egon Schiele. Um, who else? Ewan Uglo. Those were the people I was looking at a lot, and to the extent where like I was mimicking Uglo's style, right? I was like, okay, because I was that teacher who I had when I was younger was all about measuring and citing, from which reveals that living, breathing kind of grid that we see in like
Right.
Uglo or Lopez Garcia. So I was really into including all of those drawing marks, but I've since graduated from that. I think we can all go through periods where we'll like mimic a certain painter. So I was really into um, like shapes, shapes and drawing. So those were my big influences going into the Academy of Art. And then I wanted, and by the way, for anybody, for anybody who doesn't know, the Academy of Art is in San Francisco. Um, and and then when I was at the Academy of Art, I think my goal was to get that like first year of just lots of painting classes and drawing classes. And then I think from what I recall, right, it's like then that second year is like unstructured, where you work on your
Yeah.
thesis. So
Yeah. Yeah, that
I
sounds
liked
right. Yeah.
how that, yeah, that's what it really attracted me to that program, that it wasn't just here's a studio space, pay $50,000 a year. There were so many classes that we were required to take, and including, I don't know if you recall, the philosophy classes at the Academy of Art, they were excellent.
Yeah.
And even if like, I mean, I just love the academic classes that they offered. Is the art history classes they always taught in conjunction with the philosophers of that time, and I got really into that. So I thought it was, yeah, a really good program. Um, so that's, yeah, that's where I, yeah, so that's what I was thinking about when I started the grad school program.
That's so cool because you're the one that introduced me to in Uglo's work.
Oh,
I remember you had that
interesting.
book
Yeah.
and Angale, and like we had
Yeah.
like people were talking about Angale, but I remember you showing me actual uh like images of both of them and just talking about like the precision of drawing and you know how long like how you and Uglo's work took, you know, it was a long process to produce a single piece and how precise everything had to be. It's really interesting from in that area of Pennsylvania. There's a strong tradition that was modernist kind of modernism and mixed with um, like a figuration that was comes from almost like the school of Charles Hawthorne, because you have
Yeah.
that kind of like his students like Edwin Dickinson and
Yeah.
you know, Leonard Anderson and kind of in that, especially in the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts area.
Mm.
So it's really cool to see kind of how, because Uglo is like just an easy jump from there.
Mhm.
See kind of Ann Gale from the to like being able to
For
appreciate that.
sure. Yeah.
So it's you had bought in because like in school I don't think we there was Alex Kaznevsky was at Dolby Chadwick at the time in San Francisco, and there was a you know people were starting to flatten things out, but it was very much like a I don't know if you felt this way, but I felt like there was very much like a 19th century painterly realism, a golden age illustration kind of influence where you had like a lot of like Zorn, Sorolla, 19th century artists. So uh, I love the fact that you had influenced like where you had brought in these people, you know, these other like the other school of thought in terms
Mhm.
of how everything's a flat shape
Yeah.
and really kind of embracing kind of the flatness and putting two notes of color together to produce like an image and what how to do that in
Yeah,
the
you're
most
right. There
elegant
was
way
that.
possible.
Yeah. Yeah, there was definitely an emphasis on at the Academy of Art, the class's emphasis on using marks and little tonal shifts to get that full form. There was. That you called it, yeah, like painterly realism, even like John Singer Sargent or yeah. Yeah. So yeah, so some of those painters, and then yeah, and Gales with Dolby Chadwick as well. And
Right, right.
like to see how they kind of merge that, flatness form is seems to be like something that maybe around that time and going forward, so many people were and are still really interested in that
Yeah.
yeah, shape
That
shape and
yeah, that type
form.
of yeah, that emphasis on shape. I like you realize it after the fact. I mean, I I realized like how you know, from there we were in a school in a really interesting time because you could see the shifts in aesthetics happening and kind of this melding of different schools of thought that were you know because like we had the Bay Area figurative movement that was always present in like
Yeah, right.
you know just like a, you know if people wanted to be you know, push the expressionistic aspects and simplify the figure even more, then you had a lot of like uh people like you know Gale and Snevsky and other figurative artists that were doing things very differently, embracing technology and um nowadays like everyone's kind of like looks like they're you know pushing that idea and I'm seeing more It's kind of having that meld of like, those different types of schools of thought. So you're in grad school. I guess I never asked you this. We were in grad school but you and I used to have conversations about Uglo and
Yeah.
show me your cityscape paintings. And I remember these. I still remember the one was like tan buildings, and you were working with these subtle shifts of like atmospheric perspective. It's like, man, that is so good. And like, you'd see like little by little, you throw these layers down, and you're like, I think this is working, and I'm going to work on this. And every day it was just uh this like evolution, this beautiful piece. And by the end of the when you were done with it, it was such a simple painting, uh but so complex. I remember I would, when you weren't there, I'd go in your studio and just kind of look at it. By the way, we didn't have doors in the studio, we just had curtains, so people just
Yeah.
go go
You
in each
kind of be
other's
like,
studio all the
"Ooh,"
time.
see what they're looking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, yeah. So super cool to see that. I mean, but afterwards, did you move back to the East Coast?
Let's see. I
Or did
stayed
you
in San
hang around?
Francisco for quite some time, actually. I was, teaching for the Academy of Art, and I stayed out there. Um, and then, yeah, maybe about, I was there for maybe 8 years total.
Oh
I felt
wow,
like
I
I
I didn't
needed
I don't
to,
think I
yeah,
realized that.
yeah, I felt like I needed to stay for a little while. I went in to get several, and to be teaching college for several years before I moved back. And then like a lot of my connections were there. So I had to kind of, yeah. Um, it was interesting. There's a hard visual change because like Ray, you mentioned those very kind of high key and value, I mean, high key rooftop compositions.
Yeah.
And then I moved back east, and the light can be quite dreary. The materials that they build buildings with here are different. So there's like darker tones, there's a lot of brick, kind of deeper colors in the architecture, and light, of course. Light affects us so much as painters. So that adjustment was very hard. Like it took me a few years to find a new direction in my work. I couldn't like continue painting San Francisco cityscapes. So sometimes I still go back to them. Like I was just teaching a weekend workshop, and I worked from, I think, a couple of my old San Francisco images for demos because the cityscape is so beautifully arranged. When the light hits
Right.
it properly, you get the wonderful shapes and great compositions. But yeah, and Ray, those like that stage, like when I was doing those rooftop compositions, they would take me forever. I think each one of those took me like a good like 2 months, and they were very small. And like
Yeah, yeah.
I was so neurotic about the whole process. I had only one linen that I wanted to work with. I was stretching all of my own
Yeah,
canvases.
that's
Like,
right.
yeah, I
I
was super
remember
into
that.
geometry. It's like I wasn't composing them on the golden section, but like I was really aware of those ideas of like exactly what the rectangle is doing. And yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that was interesting. But the thing, do you know that when I had first presented my first thesis idea, it was so much work. I spent like months stressing out about it, and it was going to be a series of figures. I was going to
Oh,
do
I didn't know that.
all figurative, yes. And I was in such a conundrum, not a conundrum. I was in such a tricky spot because I felt like I had to continue taking this academic path as far as subject matter went.
Right, right.
And it was like I
Know the
was
feeling.
still, yeah, I was like still attached to this idea from college and maybe my early 20s of like being a really developed figurative painter. And I couldn't do it. It wasn't resonating with me anymore.
Isn't that really
So
interesting that like when we came into grad school, like I had the same thing. Like we had very fixed ideas of what we felt was great painting. Wanted to always aspire to that. Like, but they were overly simplistic, like painting the figure really well, being able to do it in a classical setting.
yeah,
And because we knew, I mean, they were difficult. It was difficult to do, and a lot of training to do it. And just a lot of practice, and it was very satisfying when you put it off. But when it came time to do your own work, still felt like, I know I did. Like I felt like I had to fit into that mold because,
Yeah.
I didn't want to. I wanted to be considered a good painter.
Uh-huh.
And it's something as simple as like subject matter, like you were saying, and like sometimes like you come to the realization, like, as much as you like it, it's not really something that you would. It's not the first thing you think about doing when you get up in the morning. It's more of a
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And it's,
exercise.
yeah, we get this idea that we have to like prove ourselves, like, yes, we are like very strong classical painters and we can paint the figure. But yeah, you get up and you're like, yeah, it doesn't really light you up. It's very fun to like be in a class, I think, like painting a head, right? Or painting the nude. But I think that was different than actually developing a body of work of nude figures for my thesis project. It's not, I didn't want to be sitting there working from photos of the nudes. And yeah, it was also that the shapes weren't interesting to me. Like, walking around San Francisco, there are all of those amazing shapes in the roof lines, the rooftops. I'm like, it was more interesting to me ultimately. So
Yeah.
I rewrote my whole thesis. So it set me back a whole semester. So I added a whole semester.
Wow, I didn't know
The
that.
academy,
I
I
didn't know you had
did.
that at all.
Yeah.
Okay. So when did you graduate?
I don't know. I don't remember the
She's like,
exact year because I know I went to Italy for a semester or for the summer, and then I added a semester. So I don't remember the exact year and date. I'm horrible with dates.
no, it's funny. As soon as I answered that question, I was like dreading you asking me the same question because
Yeah,
I'm
I
like,
know,
boy,
right? Yeah,
when did I
yeah.
I think I graduated in '09.
In '09. Okay.
So, but
That was 4 years.
what was life like after grad school? I mean, you started to teach for the academy, but like, what did you start showing right away with galleries, or were you painting, trying to figure things out? I mean, what was that experience like?
Yeah, I continued with the cityscape paintings and still life. So I do like a little still life, maybe like, kind of thinking about Uglo and little facets and planes. And then I would do my cityscape painting. So I continue with that series. And I was working with the gallery on Geary Street, like right off of Union Square. So it was I worked with them for a while, and then the one of the gallerists, he now just opened his own gallery in Mill Valley. Um, so I'm working with him right now for an upcoming solo show. But yeah, I continued painting that with those ideas in mind, very shape oriented atmosphere. And then yeah, I was working a lot for the Academy of Art, and that was really fun. Like I was teaching a lot. Did you ever work in the foundations department teaching there, Ray?
No, no, I didn't. No, no.
Oh yeah, that was wild and super fun. Like it was so energizing. So I was teaching first in the foundations department. So I was teaching all these figure drawing classes. And I would go into a room with like, sometimes they would have like 28 students enrolled, and there were a
Oh
lot of
my God.
international students too that, so there was a language barrier. So they were, I think, 5 or 6 hour classes. Some of them were
Right,
3, some of
right.
them were longer, but that was really exciting because I got to go back to all that classical drawing that I loved and like teach them how to like sight and measure and look for the planes and looking at like Vanderpool and um gosh Gottfried Baumes. Do you know his drawings? That German teacher Baumes,
No,
Bammes.
actually,
Yeah, it's so good.
Bammes. Of
George Bridgman.
course, yeah.
So I love that. And I remember I would like every week, I'd spend like at least a full day the day before prepping. I would have handouts like this thick, like pages and pages of like George Bridgman, uh, and always trying to get them to like look for the planes. So that was really
Yeah,
fun. That was super fun.
that's cool.
Yeah, teaching a
Yeah,
lot for the
I went
Academy of Art.
I went right into teaching myself, and I did the same thing. I went back into my alma mater, Fredonia.
Oh, you
So, and I
did?
taught
Yeah. So
started
what
yeah, I
classes were
started
you
teaching.
teaching?
bigger drawing,
Uh-huh.
mostly in like intermediate painting, a
Yeah.
little later on. And so it was that. Yeah, it was like I loved it because it got me back to like what I loved about grad school, which was being able to draw from the model and
Yep.
control lighting and just conceptualize form and really try to sink your teeth into like uh how to better train yourself. And so
Mhm.
yeah, Vanderpool was like, oh God, I love that book.
Yeah.
Um
So
uh
beautiful.
it's such a good book. And it's so I love the idea of he's so analytical about the structure, the plane structure
Mhm.
of doesn't really talk about it in the sense of like, oh, this is the pectoralis major and this is where it attaches. It's more so like he talks about it in general forms, but as the way he writes is like, okay, the form goes back and then it goes back in and then it comes back out again because of the orbit. Like he's talking about the zygomatic.
Yeah.
And like if you, I guess like after that training that I had at the academy, I understood it. Like it's like, oh, he's literally doing something like reminded me so much of like Zhao Ming and how he talked about form, but just like a book
Mhm.
things. And so I
Planes.
just love being able to, yeah, just to jump
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah.
So you were teaching at the academy and then working with the gallery. And so I know there was a point in time where did you do any other studying after that point? Because I know you went to Italy for another workshop um, with Israel Hirschenberg, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That was after I moved back east. That first year that I moved back east, I thought, okay, I need something to transition me, and this is a perfect like opportunity. Um, yeah, or shortly before I moved back home. Yeah. So it was like, yeah, I did took the master class in Italy. So that's a Jerusalem Studio School, JSS in Civita. So Israel Hirschberg runs a program in Castellana, which is about an hour north of Rome in the Lazio region, which is where the Roman Campagna is, where Corot painted. So the school is set up um, where you can kind of find some of the spots where Corot painted, though some are a little difficult to get to, or the land has changed a lot. So I did that, and that was great because I just wanted to be in an environment. I think it was 4 weeks long, the program I did. And I don't know if you know the painter Susan Lichtman,
Yeah.
but she was the master class teacher. So he has the school kind of in this kind of umbrella. So he'll have like a master class teacher and then a couple teachers teaching a workshop under him. So just being in this environment where everybody is obsessed with like tone and Corot and like color spots and like the most simple, pure little like painterly obsessions.
Yeah.
It was super fun. It was great.
That See, that's when I left and I moved back to the East Coast.
Mm.
I don't even know how I came about reading it. It might have been actually Chuck Pyle. Do you know Chuck? Do you remember Chuck
Yeah,
from the
yeah, yeah,
Academy? Yeah.
absolutely.
So like I think he had told me in a phone conversation I had with him, messaged me randomly. Like you need to read this book if you're a painter, and it was Hawthorne on painting.
Yeah,
I have no idea who that is, and
yeah.
like and so then what I as soon as I opened page one, it was like, oh my god, this is everything. So, I got into like perceptual painting and like Haffa and like Scott Noel or like Susan Lichtman, a bunch of like the painting perceptions blog.
Oh, that
Um,
blog is it's so great.
yeah,
Yeah.
so just seeing people, and the JCC Jerusalem Studio School Masterclass, I would look at all like their updates and everything like that just to see what they were. And you had, uh, you know, said that on social media that you were rolling it. I was, oh my, so I was just like, that is so cool. But I noticed that your work had just changed. At least I saw it in the sense that it was like you took that tonalism and just pushed it even further into this really beautifully elegant. It just, I don't know what it was. It wasn't like I was always a fan of your work, but I noticed like there was like a just a jump where it was like, whoa, Claudia's doing something that's like so high level, it's blowing me away here.
Oh, thanks,
Um,
Ray. Thank you so
did
much.
you feel that you had like a change or an epiphany that happened?
Yeah. So I was very frustrated with my work. So I had this very rigid classical drawing background, and I could never get away from it. It was so helpful, but I needed to stop drawing. Like even when I was still living in San Francisco, teaching for the Academy of Art, working for that gallery, like everything was draw, draw, draw. So like my cityscapes were drawn out, and I thought, there's no freedom in this. And I went through a long period where I did not like painting, and I wanted to love it. Like I was committed to figuring out, like, I mean, I wanted to give up so many times, to be honest with you, over the period of maybe like 5 to 7 years, at least, long time, where I kept on working, and I couldn't get past certain confines I'd created for myself. So one thing I wanted to do was, go, work with the Jerusalem Studio School in Italy. So that was helpful, but I was only there for like a month. It's not like,
Right.
and it's very independent too, by the way. It's not like they're teaching you direct skills every day. Like you go out into the landscape and they might find you 2 times a week, or you go to a critique and they, give you some feedback. So it's not like they're like directly teaching, like, this is not how to, these aren't like, it's not a how to paint workshop. It's ideas, giving you ideas to apply. So one thing I recall, I think I was talking to people in that group, and Israel Hirschberg's son, and one thing he said was he spent about a year. So I'm talking to people trying to like glean information to help me break free from this drawing that I'm constantly, this obsession with composition, obsession with drawing. And he mentioned that he did, and this information not be exactly accurate. Something like he mentioned that he did premier coups, the Edwin Dickinson idea of that first
Yeah.
strike, for about a year. So he just did one shots, over and over and over again. And I was like, that's one thing that I can start doing to start to loosen up. So I started to do paintings quickly. And that was so foreign to me, because prior to that, I valued labored paintings. Like I love
Right.
like looking at Lopez Garcia book and be like, oh, he worked on this from 1982 to 1991. Like it must be good. Like I had this idea that like labor was an ideal, like, to pursue. And it was not working for me, like I did not enjoy painting. So I started to work more loosely, and eventually, just what you mentioned earlier, like there was this change in my work. That's what happened. So I was
Yeah.
finding different ways to kind of break through, work looser. And I had to tell myself that I'm not going to draw anymore. So that's another thing, like just to stop drawing altogether. Now I do sometimes take a brush, and like a lot of my online students will see, like I'll draw out lightly only with oil paint, a brush and oil, but I quickly destroyed that under drawing. So there was a period where I didn't do any drawing, just tonal, like spots and splotches, so that nothing was rigid anymore. So that was like, it took, though, even from that point on, it was like at least like 2 or 3 years of practicing, taking workshops, like constantly exposing myself to artists who worked looser, not looking at like Uglo anymore, like I can't look at painters like that anymore. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
looking at different painters too, like everything. Yeah, it was a lot of work to like to kind of break free of those like earlier constructs that helped me learn, but like weren't serving me anymore. So
Right. Oh my God. You know, I totally empathize with that, especially
yeah,
since like you realize when you've when those influences have run their course and you need to move on and need to evolve, you need something else.
yeah, yeah,
And not liking painting was like, yeah, I remember something, something like that it definitely happened to me. It was like, oh, I don't want to keep producing work like this because it's so painful.
yeah,
I'm happy when it's done, but like I'm starting to ask myself if it was worth it. And I know what
yeah.
you mean
That's
about with
interesting.
like
Yeah,
drawing in a sense, like it's, for those watching, it's not like it's drawing in a sense that drawing was becoming such a important, such a part of the process that it was almost inhibiting, like in the
yeah,
sense that like I remember I was doing like you were saying, like exact things and like drawing everything out and just like so precise and keeping to that, and then following this like process that's always gotten me results, and then realizing like there's just a dread to it, knowing full well that like you go out of that, but you're worried about going out of that because it's almost like you feel like you're letting those influences down,
yeah.
right?
There's a
It's
lot of
such a weird
judgment.
thing.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah.
You're right. It is. Those teachers, right? We have those formative teachers
Right.
that do, like that chatter.
Yeah.
You are, yeah, you feel
Yeah.
that way. How do you break out of it, Ray? Like if you feel, because I think a lot of painters, like, or there can be a perception, especially to like the newer painter, that like this should always be enjoyable. And I guess you and I can agree that it's not always like you have to stay with it though to start to enjoy your process or develop a process that you like, right? Like, so have
Right.
you since developed a process where like you actually even enjoy the building stage of the painting, not just the end result?
Yeah. 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 I mean, the first thing I started to do was I had out of school, it was like I'd gotten into pretty nice gallery in Park City, Utah, and I
Oh,
thought, okay,
cool.
well now I'm gonna start painting.
Yeah.
And I realized I was coming to that realization that you were having. It's like, oh, I don't enjoy these certain parts, and like, what really do I want to do? And so I ended up getting dropped by the gallery because I wasn't. I was sending different things. I was like in this crazy evolution
Gosh.
stage, and so I decided once Hawthorne and painting, I read that, reread the Art Spirit, Robert Henry, and
Oh,
really
yeah.
got into Vanderpool after it's actually a critique that I had gotten by an artist by the name of Rob Rupel. So he's a production designer in Hollywood, incredible artist. But he had recommended like he had gave me a critique about like I needed to expand my understanding of form and what that meant, and structure a lot more. And so once that happened, I said, I'm going to stop trying to paint things that like, oh, belong in like a gallery. I'm going to just experiment. So that's what I did for, a while. I just always had a painting on the easel that I was trying something different.
Mhm,
And I trying to find a way of working that worked for me.
mhm.
Eventually I realized that the way of working I like, the way that I like working best is not having a set way of working. So
Yep.
I've developed
Mhm.
the process that like it's all about just what's best for the painting.
Yep.
As long as I'm enjoying that, then I know it's as long as it doesn't feel like it's like I've got to go through like the routine. Once it starts becoming routine, or I guess routine is a bad word. Um, Almost like a fixed process, like a fixed path
Mhm.
that I'm blindly following. That's when I know that I have to change things
Yeah.
up. But like you said, it takes so long to understand that, and you realize how unique you are as an individual too, and like as great as the training is, it also is like it's limited just because by its nature. And um that's just because it's just only a fixed set of humans that you're training with.
Yeah.
And when you have access to like, okay, now what I want to do, and you got to start asking yourself that question, like you kind of have an existential crisis, when
Yep.
artistically.
For
um
sure. Yeah.
so yeah, and so it's so cool that you did that, because I know there, I've seen some other of our colleagues, grad school, where I could see like they, there was a continuation of what they were doing in school, and it never kind of changed.
Yeah.
And um, I could, the danger is always like if it doesn't change, and you almost become a pastiche of yourself because everything becomes, like I said, routine, and then you start regretting the work, and it's really not fair to the work. So I remember these types of studies you were doing. Were you embracing like the palette knife, or because these like your paintings, it's not that they changed like, oh my goodness, is somebody different. It was like Claudia on 2.0, and it was just pure shape, and it's like, man, this is it. And I know you were saying like you took the drawing aspect out of it. For those people that are this is the point that I wanted to make, is that for those that are watching, Claudia means drawing. It's like drawing in a linear sense, where like you're pre-setting up all the shapes. Like there's still drawing in here. You're just going you're thinking about it as a mass that you're moving around.
Exactly.
Like a color note.
Like a color note, a mass. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
instead of, I actually thought about giving you for this slideshow one of my really old paintings to show the difference, but yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So I think what I do now, instead of drawing in a linear sense, like you mentioned, I draw with shape. So I really carve out shapes, and even that can get a little restricting. So now I'm trying again, going through, I feel like another period where I'm shifting and I'm wanting to work with even more freedom still. But yeah, like in that little painting, it's a very small painting I started in my backyard, and it was terrible. So I thought, well, I'll bring it inside and I'll keep on working on it. And I just changed everything. Like, so another thing that I used to do, Ray, was like, I was very committed to the motif in front of me, like I had to keep on
Right.
staring at something. And for this painting, I brought it inside and I worked on it over a few more sessions, and I changed so much. Like the whole background of trees is like invented. So that's another thing that I felt I got more comfortable with, just making things up for the sake of the painting.
Right.
Um,
Isn't it? It's such a it's it sounds so simple, but
yeah,
it is like so wild of concept to even think about
I
introducing, at least like
know.
from our training, like everything had to be referenced. It's
Yes.
like bing, bing,
Yeah.
bing, bing. Like it's like, what do you mean that there's like that tree you moved it?
You
And
moved it.
you're not even, and you're just making up a
Exactly.
tree. What's going on there?
Yeah. 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 So yeah, it was
So
like propaganda. Yeah. And then we're
right,
like the
right,
rebels, like, no, I'm gonna change the shape of the tree and the color of the tree and the color of the sky. I think I kept intact the kind of abstract nature of that kind of shrub and the grass in the front. But a lot of it's in the whole kind of backgrounds invented. So
yeah,
one thing I like to do now, yeah, like include some invention. And in some paintings, like especially if you're working in your studio during the winter and you have got this like this reference has just, it feels like it's like all of those parts are want to be part of the painting. But sometimes a fun challenge is to like try to figure something out that where whether you're painting from life or from a reference, and it doesn't have every component. Like, how do you solve that problem? Like are you willing to just kind of make some things up and step out of that comfort zone or those constructs?
yeah,
That one was
and almost have like you're. I think these are really definitely like capturing the feeling of the place more so than it's not like I always love paraphrasing. The painter Scott Christensen,
yeah,
by any
I know
chance?
of him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So he would. I heard a talk of him talking lecture he did about composition, painting, and how he approaches it. And he had. I love the way he put it. Paraphrasing him, but he said like the whole point of painting for me is not to have an accurate census certified reaccount of like every single little tree, every single little thing. It's like my job, I feel, as a painter, is to paint the feeling of it,
Yeah.
what it was, what I felt being there,
Hmm.
and kind of that mindset kind of opens you up to all of these different types of possibilities because you're no longer asking yourself, no, I can't do that because of
Mhm.
certain reason, strain.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
for sure.
I
It's
guess we
like
should talk
painting what
about
the painting needs, kind of.
right, painting what
Yeah,
the
what does
painting
the
needs.
painting need? Like obviously,
Yeah.
if you're stuck with maybe you have this wonderful motif in front of you, or still life set up or model, and it's still not working. Like, yeah, I'd be like, well, yeah, put the things aside that I'm painting. Like, what does the painting need? And I think that's one thing too. I'll ask myself. Do you ever do that?
Oh, all the time,
Yeah.
all the time. And I am always reminded that all my favorite painters did that too.
Yeah.
That wasn't like when you go back to people, Sargent or Soroya or um just insert painter that you like, even the ones that are like considered like I don't know, Louis Passion Lepage or like Ernest Meissonier or like even Jerome.
Hmm.
They were willing to change things all the time. Nature was just a stepping stone. It was a
Yeah.
reference point and like not literal fact
Hmm.
for making a picture. And I think that that's also the distinction that I made too was um difference between like exercise and what making a picture.
Hmm.
Craig Nelson had told. I don't know if you took classes with Craig, but you probably ran into him.
Maybe
Did you run
one,
into him at
maybe
the?
one. I
Yeah,
think he was more
yeah.
undergrad, but yeah.
Okay. Craig, like later on, like it was towards the end of my tenure at grad school, um, that I got a chance to do like kind of studies with him, classes with him. He was very adamant about drawing that distinction. He would say to us like, and when we were drawing from like took like a quick studies class with them. Some people were beating themselves up doing a bad painting,
Right.
and
Yeah.
he had said like these aren't paintings, folks. Like these are exercises. And it was just a like little thing, and I didn't quite understand it at the time, but like now it's just like it makes total sense. And once you do that, once you allow yourself to be like, oh, I am studying this,
I
you know,
completely agree, Ray.
yeah,
That reframing, just using a new word. Yeah, like he said, they're exercises. Yeah, exercises. Like you said, studies. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
like who cares, right? Who
who
cares if it's bad?
cares?
Because it never was meant to be anything
Yeah,
outside of just like a thought experiment,
yeah,
stuff, a visual thought experiment. So, uh, and the funny thing is, a lot of times, if you have that attitude, at least if I have that attitude, which I usually end up with like really good paintings,
yeah,
um,
for sure.
because that restrictive part of my brain is not no longer they're having lunch while I'm working on just having fun and enjoying myself.
Yeah,
So you
that's
had
huge.
so along this whole time, like I know that you were doing still lifes, but I don't remember you doing florals.
I wasn't doing
Um,
any. Yeah,
okay, when did that happen? These are like
couple years ago.
I love your florals. Like these are just absolutely just stunning,
Yes,
uh,
right. Thanks so much. I
pieces.
threw in that large one because that like, well, you can't tell there that it's large, but I have some of my more like traditionally composed ones. And then right now I'm doing some bigger. It's like another thing I went to break away from. Like, okay, I'm doing a lot of florals, a certain size, a certain composition. And then that one right here, that one's like 30 inches by 32 inches. So
Oh,
just
okay.
getting away from like
How big are
those are
these
like
right
12
here?
by 12 inches by 13 inches about, or the one on the far right, the orange flowers or Mexican sunflowers. That's like a 12 by 12 or 14 by 14.
Got it.
Um,
Okay.
so yeah, it was kind of another thing. I thought, well, what happens if I don't have anything anchored, if it is just some floral forms in an environment more like a landscape. So that's been something
Yeah.
I'm experimenting with now. And then the flowers, I think, came to be because they were just another way for me to explore something new. So, like, okay, if I have a dense like bouquet of flowers, like you can't draw it out. Like you have to paint it abstractly. So it was another way for me to get to a new stage in my work. So there was some Manet, there's a Manet show I saw when I was at Boston University at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. And there's a quote, I was telling my students this quote, I walked into this Manet exhibit and the quote on the wall was, a painter can say all he wants to with fruit or flowers or even clouds. And it's just that like
Awesome.
painterly saying like, it doesn't matter what you paint. And there's some mixed bouquets by Manet. And it was, several, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I went to the market, got a little mixed bouquet, and I'm like, this is so much fun because everything had to be really soft. All the edges had to be very lost, otherwise it wouldn't work. And then it was from that moment on that I started to do them more often. So
Wow. Wow.
yeah.
It's that I love that era of painting that reason. Like you had absolutely like something like De La Roche or Jerome and had NA and they were both existing at the same time.
Uh-huh.
Just to be able to kind of like it reminds me of like being an artist today, which is you have so many influences, but I love the idea of simplification. It's so hard to do too. It's like do it in a manner that feels like it's a complete picture and
Yeah.
statement
Yeah. It's just
making it. So
simplifying. Yeah.
yeah, especially scaling up to working on a larger size. At least for me, I know it's like, oh boy, I got a lot more real estate, but not
Yeah.
to. I have to kind of remind myself like, don't uh, just because it's a lot more real estate doesn't mean you necessarily have to put a lot more stuff. Like you have to scale up your brushes and think about, it's just so much more physical of a presence
It is.
just
It
in your
is. It's just like you
studio.
have
And
to, yeah, like this, your process has to like shift a little when you work larger. Like,
yeah,
yeah. Do you find that you like when you work large, do you use larger brushes, Ray, or do you just use
oh
like
yeah.
thinner, more rapid? Okay.
No, my arm would fall off. Actually, it was like I remember one time I was like painting with a small brush on a large painting, and I thought, I'm gonna have like I'm gonna stop painting in years, if
Yeah.
I
Yeah. It's,
if I continue like this, But
yeah.
it's always helpful to watch, to obviously, like you were saying, look at other like actual paintings in real life to see how big they are, how broad they are in application,
Yeah. Scale is
and
interesting, which is,
right is it's like it's such a when you look at mayonnaise is a great example. It's like I'm always reminded of the ones they have at the Met because I'm from Queens originally, so I when I go
yeah.
back
Are
to
you going to
visit
go
my
see the
family,
show, by the way? The
oh
current
yeah,
Manet Day got, okay, cool.
I'm like running there as soon as
Yeah.
I get in town, and so just to see the uh just to see those in real life and like like you notice like a life size pant leg, it's like a single stroke. Think of like how much how many times he had to probably do that, like from previous paintings, or if you nailed it at the same, that type of how good you have to be like at that moment to
To get that
nail that.
down. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fresh. Keep it fresh like that. Those big direct marks. Yeah. It's so hard. It's so hard to do that.
Yeah. I remember talking to uh uh Eric Bowman, who's a Western painter,
Uh-huh.
and I were talking a lot about that, how like it's difference between small and large is that small, like you would get a beautiful mark that just was a result of like your brush skipping accidentally maybe.
Mhm.
And when you try and capture that larger, it takes so much more effort to kind of make
Yep.
that like it's fresh because you have to use your entire body instead of just your wrists.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so yeah, it's so cool to see that type of stuff. So you're working so right now are you moved back to the East Coast, and so now you're in still teaching, but are you with any schools, or are you doing your own thing?
Yeah. I was with, I was a adjunct professor at a school in Lancaster, Pennsylvania for about, I don't know, 2.5 years. Um, and then with COVID, some of those classes went online. And then after that, I started a lot of my own, classes online. So I teach now for, I have my own classes, and then once a week I teach at an art center outside of Philadelphia, maybe 2 semesters a year. But the school in Lancaster is about an hour and a half drive for me. So it just wasn't good. It couldn't be a long-term thing, to drive an hour and a half and then teach 3 hours and then an hour and a half home. So right now, yeah, mainly teaching for myself. And then I run a workshop in Maine in the summer.
Oh,
Yeah, so that's been really fun. So that's like at the end of August, Ray, when it's so deadly, uncomfortably muggy, in Pennsylvania, New York, to be on the Maine coast. So yeah,
oh
so
yeah,
that's
it
what
must
I'm
be, yeah.
doing. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I mean, I'm so happy that you're teaching because uh you have the I guess personality that would make a great teacher.
Oh,
Um,
that's right.
that
Yeah,
I
likewise.
think it's oh, thanks. I think that it's like you can tell when certain people when they're like fans of the like students of the game,
Mhm.
as much as like anything else. So they're just like we're just fans, and like we love sharing um different artists and things like that. And like I think teaching allows you to just have a conversation with people and kind of recreate that excitement of discovering someone new, over and over again
Yeah,
through other people and seeing
yeah.
how they evolve. So um, I'm glad you're doing that. So I guess other than that, so what are you working on now in the studio? I mean, what's your current I guess project that you're
Yeah. Let's see. I'm having a solo show in May at the gallery that's in Mill Valley, just outside of San Francisco. So I am working on that.
okay, what's
Um,
what's the gallery called?
yeah, Kim Eaglesmith Gallery. He's right in like for anyone listening or who will listen, he's in right in downtown Mill Valley. There maybe like there's a whole handful of galleries that kind of were part of that exodus during COVID, leaving San Francisco. So Kim Eaglesmith was had a gallery in downtown San Francisco, and then during kind of in the middle of COVID, he decided to move the gallery to Mill Valley. So that's going to be in May, and I'm trying to for this show really keep it quite cohesive. My last show, I had a fair bit of cityscapes and my floral still life and my landscape and a lot of different sizes. So what I'm currently working on, a lot of for me, what's large, like 30 by 30s, 24 by 30s, 24 by 40s, 34 by 34s, like a lot of bigger landscapes that are kind of in this subject matter. I would say working from some of my studies from Italy. I did a residency in Italy, not this past summer, the summer before. So I accumulated so much work, I would just paint all day, for like 3 weeks, all day. So I had like all these little studies. So I'm still working through those and using those as springboards for larger paintings. So some Italian influenced, Italian landscape influenced, and some kind of larger florals that I'm working on.
yeah
So yeah, it's been a lot of work, and it trying to keep, I think right now, Ray, and I'm curious how you kind of kept things fresh for your upcoming show, like trying to keep things fresh, whereas like you want cohesion in your work, but you can't repeat the previous success. You can't just say, oh, that one worked, I'll do another one like that, because then
right
there's no excitement in building the painting. There's none of that like pure inspiration that makes painting so exciting.
yeah
Um,
yeah
yeah, so I guess
it
that's
feels
where
like if you repeat the same thing, it's like your painting almost feels like a stock image
yeah, yeah. You just
and or
repeat
like
yourself. It's like it's as bad as like copying, like Morandi. Like if you can't like copying yourself, it's like the same problem. So like yeah, so a lot of what I'm thinking about is like, where are those cohesive threads where there could be some, like, I mean, you can go back to the same motif over and over again, but then you have to do it each time differently. Like, it has to be a different composition, or maybe a different time of day, or
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it's for me. It's funny that you said that you're scaling up, because that's exactly what I do with my solo show. I like previous one I had at IBOM Fine Arts is I'm having where I'm having my second one
Uh-huh.
with them was like that. It was like a little bit of everything, that multiple sizes and things like that. And this one I really wanted to focus on being cohesive
Hmm.
and scaling up my work. But yeah, it was quite a process going through that, because I wanted to paint larger on a consistent basis. And I also was trying to find the identity of the show, and also find the identity of all of the influences that I was having, what I
Yeah.
wanted the show to look like. And like, it took me a year to do all the pieces. And like, in that time, I'm like, where I started, who I was when I started, and where I am now, completely different. I changed throughout the
Interesting.
way. So like, it's like, you're right. How do you keep cohesiveness when you're changing as an artist, as you're making this thing? And I try to key it, with the subject matter and kind of the way I was depicting light. But the painting for me, I mean, every painting kind of feels super different. Uh, like I could tell you, so I don't know if it's, I mean, I've asked other people if it feels cohesive, and I know like a gallery owner, Grace, my bomb, saying like, yes, this is the most cohesive thing done. But you as an artist, I don't know if you feel this way, but I can tell, like, I look at two paintings, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so much different, this one. And an outside observer is like, what are you talking about? They're you. They're clearly you. But I'm like, no, no, no,
Completely.
no, no, no.
Yeah.
This is this version of me. Like, this is
Yeah.
old me, and this is like,
That's the old
this,
me, 3 months ago me. Yeah.
you might as well be a different person,
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah,
so I
completely.
don't, I'm a little bit too close to the work right now,
Yeah.
since I just finished the last painting for it. But
How many
it's
paintings are in the show?
I did, it's going to be about 25 pieces.
Nice. Yeah. It's a lot of
And
work.
mixture of like drawings, as I do studies, and smaller studies, like and then larger pieces, large, medium, and small pieces. So it's
So the 25 is a combination of everything from your larger pieces to a few
yeah,
studies. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
I found
interesting.
like, it's, at least with this show, uh I wanted to do everything big. I even had plans to do things like my largest painting to be like uh just like a, so 30 by 60. That's what
Yeah.
I wanted
That's
to do,
really large.
my largest one. And my, at least, the gallery, my gallery was saying like, have a lot of large paintings, you might want to throw into medium sized pieces, just to have some variety. But it was great advice, because I realized how exhausting painting large constantly
Mm,
is, and like I needed like a break uh,
mm,
with a medium sized painting. So because I had like a lot of really large pieces and
yeah.
really small pieces, but nothing in between. So it wasn't like I had a painting that was medium sized. It didn't take me that long, and I felt good about like, okay, this is a final. This is not like selling. So
Yep.
I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, do you always think about pacing? Because I realize like, it's definitely a marathon. It
Yeah.
burn yourself out really
Very
easily.
easily. Hmm. Yeah, because I normally, like, if I don't have the pressure of a show, like, I don't work in a very linear way. I'm really working purely only when I'm inspired. Like, not in a way where, like, oh, I don't do work when I'm not inspired, but like, I'm maybe doing a lot of small studies, a lot of exploratory stuff, and then I'm waiting for the kind of the right idea that I want to go with for a large piece. Whereas working towards a show where I want to keep the sizes a little bit more similar, I'm kind of forcing myself to make those decisions faster, to not to not, I don't have as much time to process before I go to a larger painting. So it is a marathon, yeah, for sure. And I have to take breaks. Like I find that if I paint, like, I'm not a very scheduled painter. I paint like in various times of the day, on weekends, like depends on my teaching schedule, which is always changing. If I'm just plowing right through, the work loses its strength. So I have to stop for a day or two, maybe either work on my classes or just do, like today, I think I'm going to just do some little gouache studies. So that's what I'm balancing right now, right? Like how much can I work just like kind of pushing forward in a very linear way until I know I need to just stop for a day or two.
Yeah, yeah. It's oh man, it's so I was totally understand where you, because you don't want to get sick of the process,
Yeah.
because you know you have a deadline, you have to, the commitment you have to make. And it, getting, I found with the larger pieces, I was just with the show, I was just days where I was just exhausted.
Yep.
It's like I'm not going to be productive today on that, so I'm going to go productive in other sense, or like switch up my medium a lot of times. I was actually, you know, after my workday, what I would do is I would spend an hour or two at night, just after family went to sleep or started late, and I would just spend an hour or two doing something different. I was messing up that 3D. Now I think I mentioned that too, and so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do a sculpture on in something like that. Didn't, it was just for the, that was so separated from what I did, because I found if I like painted in oils or did an oil painting, then it like had to be associated with the show. It had to be, it had to
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
a function to it. Like I
Yeah.
had to have a purpose for existing, and outside of it just being um so it's hard, yeah. So, and sometimes you just got to take the day off,
Yeah. Yeah. You
even
have
though you
to.
feel bad, you know.
Yeah, you do. You feel a little guilty, like, I should be doing that. I should be doing this. But I think it serves the work in the long run to not force. You can't force paintings. You can't force good work to happen. So you never know. And I mean, the thing too about painting, which is exciting and frustrating, like you never know when a painting's going to turn out. You can't decide like, oh, this one, like now this one's going to be a good one.
Right,
You know,
right.
sometimes it's so surprising, like the little like the turns the painting takes. Um, Sometimes I'll decide to stick with something that, I mean, literally is not working for the longest time, like many passes, and it's still not working. And I'll decide to stick with it, and it will take a turn and become a painting I like. But sometimes they don't, and I have to prime over the whole panel, you know? So I
Yeah,
hate that,
isn't
like
it really
with this.
I just you know, there, you, with me there are a lot of paintings that I'll struggle with, and like that, like in the end they work out, and it's like, oh my goodness, you know, they become one of my favorites. And then I forget how awful the process was, you know,
Yep.
all the time. I'm like, oh
Yep.
no, that was an easy one, right? You know, and you're like, and then so like you jump into the next painting that's a struggle, and you're like, why is this so hard? You know, and then you
Oh,
realize it
that's,
was like went
I
through
had
the,
the
you just
same
went through it, and
revelation.
you forgot.
Yes, yes, that you have to remember how hard some of the previous paintings were to get that breakthrough in them.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, that's interesting. I have the same awareness now, Ray. And one thing that has helped me recently, I found in my camera roll, process images of paintings that were terrible for the first few months. And that turned out well. And it was just, you know, it was so serendipitous that I came across some of these images, because that's what I'm struggling with right now. Just reminding, but it served to remind me that sometimes the early stages of the paintings that I've ended up liking were very awkward paintings in the beginning. Um, Yeah.
That's so interesting. That's such a great practice. I do that for like social media, but I never really like half of them I forget to post. So like I've never really gone back to paintings that were a struggle in the beginning, and you have like documented proof.
Yeah. Yeah. You're
It's
like,
so funny. It's just like little mind games, right?
it
It's
is.
like it's like why at least I feel like I'm such a ridiculous person. Like why would one word or one classification change, all of a sudden change my mind about the whole thing.
The whole thing. Yep.
Seeing one little thing, um, like take me from like not wanting to paint on this piece anymore to like willing to spend, as long as it takes on.
Yep.
It's like you sort of rekindled your love for painting itself.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, that's I'm happy that you're going into, like I'm talking to you as you're in the middle of it and I'm like finishing it up, because
Yeah.
when I was
It's,
when I was starting my painting, my solo show, I was talking to an artist who had just finished theirs,
yeah.
and I was just like, how do you feel, because I'm like, it's like I have all these hopes and dreams, and like, you just don't know what's going to happen about the whole process. And so I mean, I know I feel way uh really good about the work, and it's the first time I've been able to say to like, okay, this is a strong show. This is the past though, and I'm really looking forward to the future.
Mhm.
So there's like kind of like um distance that I can put with the piece that I wasn't able to do with my first
Yeah.
solo show. Everything had to be like, it was just your first outing, and so like it had to be good. And I found that I had a lot more fun painting this show, even though it was pretty stressful.
Yeah. Yeah.
See the light of day for a while. So,
What is
um,
your like if you had if there was a lot of flexibility for you to produce a solo show, your next one, what is the ideal amount of time you would like to have to say produce, 18 to 20 medium to large size paintings?
yeah, I would say a year is perfect.
Okay.
It's my schedule. It's a year, about a year. I can do 8 months if it's tight, but I could do that. I know I mean, like Craig Nelson, I mean, do it in like 6. I don't know uh if I would want to do that. I mean, my first solo show I did 40 pieces, and I had to really scale back this one, but I wanted to. I had a lifestyle change. I became a father, and so
Yeah.
second, uh, priorities change. But also, I think it's important, at least for me, to let the work breathe and not to put enough too much restriction on the work, and allow myself to kind of process what's going on and being attuned to the piece itself. So that's what I think. I mean, what about yourself?
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I
Yeah.
like to let paintings just kind of gestate, just sit around for a long time and, yeah, I like to have a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that idea though, because you're collecting studies, and you're sourcing all of this stuff in, and you just, allows you to kind of see the big picture longer and see it kind of develop. As like in shorter time constraints, I feel like sometimes I found myself having to force myself to take photographs. Like I was saying, I was taking photographs every day, but actually literally organizing all my pieces into one document to see how the show is.
Yeah.
Um, because I was too much in the trenches trying to get the pieces done, a
Yeah.
certain number by a certain depth.
Yeah.
So I think having that extra time allows you to kind of freedom to see the whole piece. Because it's funny, isn't it? Like a solo show, like it's multiple pieces, but it's also one piece
Mhm.
that's made up of small pieces. It's like the gigantic
Yeah.
mass that you're putting together, and it really has to feel like it's like a single light. I think that's when
Absolutely.
they're at their most powerful.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
given
It
space
feels
for
like
that.
one idea, one thought, done in many different ways. Like It's also nice to see a little range, a little variety. You mentioned Alex Konevsky earlier, and I got his show catalog from gallery in New York City. Did a show of his work a couple of years ago, and he had like this little abstract tulip painting. He had figurative. He had long landscape paintings, like long horizontals, I mean, landscape paintings. And it was nice to see that variety. So one thing that I think about too is like, okay, like as painters, like I think I like to go to a show and see a little bit of a range of work. The saying
Yeah.
art critic stepped into the gallery might want to see something incredibly cohesive, you know? So, which, you know, obviously we shouldn't even be thinking about, but I think that I was in, you know, going to a lot of shows in New York City this summer. Susan Jane Walp, do you know her work, Ray?
No, I'm not
Uh,
familiar. I'll
yeah, I'll look up her
see.
work. Her teacher, one of her teachers was Leonard Anderson. So
Oh, okay.
her pieces are, she works small, and they're all works on paper about this big, 8 inches by 7 inches, around that size, and Tibor Denage, like the Bowery in New York City. And I was just thinking about how they were, you know, all the same size. So you walk into like this like white little cube, and they just
Oh yes, I'm super
flow in this
familiar.
little like
Yeah,
arc,
yeah,
you know? So I
yeah,
was just
yeah. I
like
know her
thinking, I've
work.
been
Yeah.
thinking so much about ways that different painters put, like, you know, work. And I think also there's some personalities where they do really well with structure, like limit the format and the subject matter, and it's maybe easier for some painters to produce. Whereas some painters need to be able to go off on tangents in order to come back to their best work. So I don't know, you know, I just think it's really interesting to see as many solo shows as possible, and
Right,
how the
right,
work is
right.
presented. And
Oh, it makes, thanks for saying that, because it makes me feel better about like my tendencies, you know, as
yeah,
an artist. I mean, I there was one thing I did do was pace myself with painting complexity of paintings. And it was because I went to a Dermot Kelly. Are you familiar with
Darmot
his
Kelly, yes,
yeah, Dermot Kelly, yeah.
beautiful, yeah,
His solo show, and he had all these like figurative pieces that take him years to do,
yeah.
but he had a whole section of still lifes. And I remember going to the person who was at the front desk, and I said, "Man, I've seen the still lifes before, like this many certain motifs." And he said, "Yeah, Darman did them because they were something that he could finish quickly.
Yep,
He did
yep.
something that he could finish quickly, and not that was in contrast to like the complicated that he would do."
So Ray, we went to
Um,
the same show. That would be funny if we had seen each other. That's the one in New York City, right? When he had the host
yeah, yeah,
gallery.
yeah.
I
Right,
Yeah,
because
I saw that.
that was his first US show, right?
Oh yeah, I guess so. And it was
Yeah.
because he's represented by Offer
Offer
Waterman
Waterman.
and Offer
Yeah,
Waterman. And so this was like a host gallery. We probably talked to the
yeah.
same gallerist. But yeah, it was
I'm
interesting,
sure we
that
did.
show. And like whole entire swaths of his canvas are just virgin white, you know, they're like
Right.
totally not touched. And I thought it was so interesting too, how he's willing to just leave blank areas of the canvas.
Yeah.
And like I'll have like a little spot of canvas or panel that hasn't been painted, and I'll feel like it needs to be covered, and I have to fight that and like remind myself of, yeah, Dermot Kelly's paintings.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
have to I haven't gotten to that point yet, but I have to do that. I
yeah,
was
yeah,
like, oh, that's just a pencil line. You know, it's like, oh,
yeah, they're so
like why don't
good.
I do that? You know,
Yeah,
yeah. No, that's so funny that you did that. Yeah, I have the canvas bag that they gave me right here, because I think they gave me like I got the catalog, and they gave me a bag, and so I take that to the gym every for a while,
yeah,
you know.
that's awesome. Yeah, I
But
have a little handful of catalogs. I think I had ordered some from Offer Waterman, and then got maybe one or two at that show. Oh yeah,
oh, cool,
I
cool,
love looking at his work.
yeah,
Oh, talk about
really,
shapes and light.
yeah,
Like, oh, the light's so beautiful.
yeah, yeah. It's very inspiring, and
Yeah.
gets you excited just to be a painter,
Yeah. Yeah.
make something. Well, I thought that was I guess a good place to end it, because I know you and
Oh,
I could talk about artists that we
I
love.
know, I know. I can talk art
I
all
know I
day
could talk
long.
about it for like 8 hours, but
Yeah.
I'd be remiss if I didn't just show people kind of where your your website right here. So
Oh, right.
we'll have all the description, all the links in the description. But here you can find just Claudia's online teaching schedule, Instagram, contact, portfolio, and news. So Claudia is super organized. Always been very organized, and so
Thanks,
you'll
Ray.
find
Though
all
that,
the information
yeah,
perfectly.
that does not always get updated as far as images, but I do definitely keep my online classes updated there. So
Yeah, yeah, but definitely check out Claudia on Instagram too, because I love your Instagram. I just
thanks,
love
Ray.
seeing your work
Likewise.
all the
Yeah, I
time.
love seeing
But
what you're
yeah,
posting too.
yeah, and
Yeah.
thanks so much for taking the time out to do this. I really appreciate it.
Oh,
And
you're welcome.
it's
It
just
was
an
so,
excuse to reconnect, because we haven't talked
yeah,
in so
yeah.
long.
Yeah, it's been so much fun to talk to you. And yeah, let's continue chatting another time. It'd be fun.
Yeah, that'd be
Um,
great.
yeah. Well, thanks, Ray. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, my pleasure. And yeah, we'll keep in touch. And thanks to everyone for watching. Again, like and subscribe. And yeah, guess we'll see everyone in the next episode. Take care, Claudia. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Bye, Ray. You're welcome.
Take care.